and welcome back to JNN's Raw Politics.
There's a higher favorability rating of the leader than there is of the party.
Join us every Monday and Thursday night at 10, exclusively on JNN.
I hope that you were truly informed. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Julian Robinson is our guest this evening, the PNP Deputy General Secretary. Welcome again, Julian.
Thank you for having me.
It has been a long campaign, a short one, filled with challenges and some victory. Take us back, let's look back at some of the things that happened in early days. It was a very challenging constituency.
It was a long campaign. I think there was some anticipation of a general election for possibly about the last 18 months. So in a sense, we've been on election alert for that period of time. And clearly, without knowing when the date is, you've been through a significantly long period of intensity. Obviously, I think the most intense period is between the announcement to nomination and then nomination to election day.
Well, some people thought that was long, and well, that was really mooted from the opposition side. But in your perspective, do you think it was a long period, or it was a time to allow the party to position the things that weren't necessarily in place?
I think it gave us an opportunity to put, ensure that the organization was fully in place, to put, your election day machinery in place. So, in a sense, we are certainly not complaining about having the additional time, and I think it assisted us specifically within the constituency.
Is that term that is always used? You always hear it, whether it's from the General Secretary or it's Paul Burke himself, the chairman, campaign managing. The PNP machinery. What is this? I mean, sometimes...
Well, it's really your organization. I mean, it starts, the party is built from the group structure up. So you have workers at the polling division level, which then move into the cluster managers, and a cluster is a group of polling divisions. And so we ensure that our organization is actually aligned to the way the elections are organized and run. And we ensure that our workers, they are well trained, they understand their responsibilities.
You want to tell me some of what that is?
Well, in essence, we try to, at the most minute level, we match workers to voters. So in most constituencies, you do a canvass, which is really a test to see the level of support that exists out there for the candidate and the party, right? Based on the canvass that you would do, that would inform the strategy that you would adopt within the constituency. It gives you an idea of where you are, and then you develop your strategy from there. But at the ground level, you try to match, one worker to 20 voters, and that person has the responsibility for ensuring that they bring out those 20 voters to the polling station.
Meaning after they have rationalized that this person is going to vote for the PNP?
Well, that is based on your canvass, because your canvass will tell you who the persons are who are likely to support you. So you should, going into an election, have a fairly clear idea, or a reasonably good idea, of how many persons will support you. You need to know their names, you need to know where they live, so you can actually get them out. And in a sense, that is the machinery, so to speak, that the PNP refers to.
The last 6 months got a little ugly, in Southeast St. Andrew in particular. Sure. At one stage, you were on set with us here.
Sure, when there was a killing.
Yes, and you were, it seemed to have thrown you off. You were so...
Well, I was concerned. I mean, there have been a number of incidents. What has happened in the last 6 months, and once you're in an election period, is that every incident becomes political, even if it is not politically motivated or political in nature. But because you are campaigning, there is a tendency for politicians to try to own every crime, which is not necessarily helpful. The night I was here, there was the unfortunate murder of Sanjay Banks. Up to now, we don't know whether that was politically motivated or not. However, once there's a perception that it's politically motivated, it does have an impact on the community, because there's likely to be a response to something, and a reprisal to a murder of that nature.
It even got uglier, because that was just one. And then there were the counter charges, and it became confusing as to what was really transpiring. There were people saying this was from your side of the fence, which is the PNP, or the counter charges at the GLP. It seemed confusing, and then all of a sudden, you know, you were in a midstream not knowing which was really the agitator or the one agitated to?
Well, you know, you're correct in the sense that there were a number of incidents. It became, you know, in the heat of a campaign, statements are going to be made about who is responsible for one crime or another. It does require a level of responsibility to ensure that you don't create an environment which inflames. And I think to some extent some of that was done. And you know, you then end up with charges and counter charges. You know, we had a challenge in election day. There were a couple of incidents on election day, on the night, even a couple of days after. But you know, knock on wood, keep our fingers crossed.
Is the community settled now, do you think?
I think a lot more settled. There is some tension in a couple of the communities. In Woodford Park, there hasn't been an incident in over a week, but there are concerns that potentially there may be incidents.
How does a campaign manager or a caretaker diffuse these type of action?
Well, I think, you know, one is, you know, it depends on whether your supporters feel they are the victims or not. And I know certainly in Woodford Park that has been the feeling. One is reassurance, and reassurance about security and having the state security maintaining a presence so people feel a sense of security. And secondly, impressing on them really the need not to retaliate, because if people feel they're under attack, the immediate reaction and response is, I'm going to respond, I'm going to defend myself. And you know, some people will be even more proactive than that. So it is trying to persuade them that this is really not a solution. But it does involve ensuring that the state resources play a role from the perspective of the police and maintaining a strong presence. And that has happened, I'd say, in the last week and a half. The last incident we had was about a week, just over a week ago. But nothing has happened since, and you know, keep our fingers crossed. Let's hope it.
One of the things, though, because you know, you're speaking about persons here and their thought in terms of the actions and the reactions that they'd want to take. But some very frightening weapons came out, explosives and stuff like that.
Yeah, there was a discovery of you know, explosive devices, which is frightening. It means that the criminals have taken their game to a new level. And it's a worrying trend. It's not just for politicians, but for Jamaicans as a whole, that this is the level that the criminals have gone to. And it is of concern that there may be a lot of other types of those weapons.
You are there, and I would ask the question, what type of social intervention could work? This is a very troubled spot. Every election, or even sporadically, violence break out there. But
I think it's multifaceted. I think you have to deal with the basic infrastructure. Persons have to have proper housing, proper sanitary facilities at a most basic level. You also have to deal with skills training and putting people in a position that they are employable, right? And that there's a whole transformation taking place within the education system. But you have to give persons, particularly the young men, a chance to do something productive. I'm not going to say that unemployment is an excuse for crime. I'm not. However, all things being equal, if somebody is gainfully employed, they have less of an opportunity to be involved in criminal enterprise. So it's important that we provide them with the opportunity. And I stress with the opportunity because there are really no jobs out there for persons if they don't have some level of skill, right? You can't just provide jobs just like that. That's really not how an economy works. You have to ensure that you have trained people and you create the necessary human capital that investment will be attracted to areas and people will want to set up businesses.
And it's training, education. This is a belt that has some of the most traditional high schools there. You know, the Camperdown, the Excel, the KC. So is it that there's a missing link after the transition from school? You know, what do you think it is?
Well, I think, you know, as you'll find in most inner city communities, I think the young men end up, for a number of reasons, end up trailing behind. You know, the women tend to do a lot better. Violence does impact attendance at school, for sure. You know, when the communities are under siege, nobody leaves their home, you know, so that has an impact. But it's not peculiar to Southeast St. Andrew, the Mountain View Belt at all. It's really the same in all of our inner city communities that are plagued by violence. And it will require a multifaceted approach on the infrastructure side, on the training side, and other interventions. Just, you know, example, how people resolve disputes as a basic one, so you don't always resort to violence. So
I tell you what, we're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we'll look at that in some more details, as well as looking at some of the victories in having returned the MP for that area, Maxine Henry Wilson. So we'll come back.